Hello folks, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. You are listening to the first ever episode of Real Talk on your very own Mojo 5.0 radio family. At Real Talk, we're going to talk about the things that matter, and that requires us to take a good hard look at the truth. Let's get things kicked off with our weekly reality check. Because in a world where New York State says there are 20 human genders, we've forgotten what reality looks like. Today's America has become so sterile, so childproof, that we now have college students begging for crying rooms or safe spaces where they can go to avoid others with opinions that may differ from their own. This is the new liberal idea. Segregate everybody except white Christian males who are apparently evil and must die, according to liberals, into safe spaces where they can reinforce each other's psychotic delusions that they are in mortal danger from Trump voters. If anything, conservative Americans need safe spaces to wave American flags in America. Ironic? No. Tragic. It is truly tragic that a group of patriotic Americans waving flags can be instantly identified as Republican with almost 100% accuracy today. But a violent mob firing off the word fascist like an AR-15 can almost surely be identified as Democrat. When did loving America become a political dividing line? At Real Talk, the only political dividing line we care about is the truth. Join me as we have some real talk about the news this week. Christmas time, the most wonderful time of the year, or so we've traditionally thought. But not for liberals. For liberals, it's yet another chance to make our lives a living hell. Yet another reason for liberals to be mad at the world and hate conservatives. Oh, and never be seen without a picket sign or a court order. These December 25th Scrooges, people who probably didn't get enough Christmas presents as children, now have it out for Christmas music, which is what I use to tune them out. And no, I'm not speaking of Christian hymns like O Come All Ye Faithful or Joy to the World. All great songs. I'm talking about that Christmas classic, Baby It's Cold Outside. Can you figure out why liberals are somehow offended? If you answered, what is, he's trying to roofie her or rape her, you guessed correct. Congratulations, Jeopardy contestants. Yet again, the left is virtue signaling. They're symbolically offended at an imaginary act of sexism or rape or sexual misconduct. In fact, they're far more offended than when these things actually occur in actual society, when they, Democrats, actually do them. In fact, the left does most of the sex crime committing and sexist remarking in American society today. Now, there would be an interesting study. The voting history of sexual deviants. Who are they, and why do they vote Democrat? I'd read it. Has to rank up there with Paula Jones' deposition ahead of the Clinton impeachment proceedings. And who can forget his hilariously brilliant defense? I mean, only an Arkansas attorney would say something like this. It depends on what the meaning of is. If you believe that, you'll believe that Korea was a police action. You probably think President Obama's farewell address claim was truthful. We did not have any terrorist attacks when I was president. We need hope. God, I don't miss that man's smug voice. Do you, folks? Trump's magic wand? How's it going to bring those jobs back? What kind of magic wand does Trump have? Well, we sure waved it and got rid of him. Presto alakazam, goodbye Barack. It's like when PETA came out and got animal crackers, the famous brand of animal cracker cookies that we all grew up with as kids, to remove the cage bars from the box on the animal cracker box. But did very little, in fact, almost nothing to help actual animals in actual captivity. Now liberals claim that they're offended by a man romantically pursuing or making sexual advances towards a woman by a fire at Christmas in this song. Because as every Me Tooer knows, that means he's trying to rape her, right? These are the same people that every year want us to teach sex ed earlier and earlier and earlier and want to pass out condoms to 5-year-olds. Yeah, they have Victorian sexual moral boundaries. Give me a break. You know the old adage, methinks you doth protest too much. Well, that's certainly applicable to liberals here. They have plenty of experience with this particular issue. But from the vantage point of the, perpetrator And also, echoing these same sentiments, one of our presidents famously said, and I quote, "He who smelt it, dealt it." Very wise words from a very wise president. Probably. One of them must have said something like it. I mean, Andrew Jackson was famous for his body wit. That's why it's a little like the pot calling the kettle black when Democrats suddenly seem to care about sexual virtue. I mean, come on, folks. This is the same Democratic Party that thinks you're too stupid to remember the last 2 times they did this. Judge Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court hearings, and before that, Roy Moore in Alabama. And this strategy of the left typically has 2 main components, 2 main parts, folks. Female lifelong Democrat activists not hot enough for the Cosby trial and without names as sexy as Stormy Daniels claim they were forcibly raped by a Republican candidate or office holder. Claims later exposed to be patently false, and women later exposed as unrepentant liars in almost every single case of this occurring. And ultimately, that's the biggest problem I have with the left on this issue, is their utter hypocrisy. The Democrats are a party of nonstop sexual depravity and rampant drug abuse. Think Keith Richards and Hugh Hefner, rest in peace, but as archetypal Democratic candidates for public office. Let's review a few examples. Bill Clinton. He went through so many interns, he found the only Jewish girl who couldn't get a stain out. In fact, Bill's still in the doghouse for this mistake, but only because Chelsea refuses to sleep there. Then there's Ted Kennedy, the Lion of the Senate. He left his mistress down at the bottom of Chappaquiddick to drown while he walked several miles to get his alibi. In addition to letting mistresses drown at the bottom of a ravine, he also had a tendency to cavort with prostitutes. Shocker, right? Liberals can now with a straight face or sincerity say that they care about sexual boundaries when they are members of a political party that views friendship with Harvey Weinstein as a membership perk. Come on, folks. Let's do some real talk on this issue. Number 1, getting roofied is something that only happens to attractive people. And let's face it, Gloria Steinem, apart from burning her bra in the 70s and getting other liberal hags to burn their bras in the 70s, there weren't many additional requests for liberal activist hags to take off their tops, unless National Geographic was doing a photo shoot, but then they would probably tell them to throw them over each shoulder. I'm not trying to be insulting, ladies, but let's face it, the orange t-shirt wearing mob of purported women living, breathing public service announcements for why we actually need abortion and proof that natural selection doesn't always favor the winners are never going to likely need abortions, nor be at risk of date rape or even rape. Really not probably at risk for sex either. Other important philosophical questions of our age include, what's the meaning of life? And if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to see it, does it make a sound? And more importantly, why are lesbians only attracted to other lesbians that look, act, and dress like men? Why not get a hot lesbian? I don't understand. This probably isn't as important of a metaphysical question as the tree thing, but it's just always puzzled me. Other notes on this song: when did women become so helpless and incapable? Did the women's lib movement not happen? Maybe I'm missing something, liberals, but it seems to me you got to pick one argument. You can't say that women are helpless and need men to protect them and are dependent on whether or not a man chooses to do the right thing or wrong thing, and then go, but women are strong and women don't need men and women are this and women are that. Get your story straight. Kind of like people saying that Bush was an evil mastermind, but he was also an idiot who couldn't speak the English language well, and Dick Cheney was really in control of everything. You can't have it both ways. You got to pick. And my next guest knows how to pick his arguments. His name is Sid Miller. You know him as the Texas Commissioner of Agriculture. In addition to being an award-winning rodeo champ, kind of great when you run the ag department, very few people would disagree that Sid Miller is known for his political incorrectness and famous for his outspoken conservatism, to the point of comedic. Remember when he pardoned cupcakes from Michelle Obama's Healthy Foods Initiative? I do. In keeping with this style, Miller was endorsed twice by the patron saint of colorful speech, President Donald J. Trump. In spite of his reputation for controversy, no conservative contender for public office would dare claim they are more conservative than Sid Miller, especially if their credentials include being a Democrat. Sid's given me a number of interviews, but in each one I learned something new. Sid has what he likes to call down-home, down-to-earth cowboy logic. Just good old common sense, Texas common sense. Sid also has some great thoughts about how we can stop the radical left, the liberals in this country, from doing what they're doing to this great classic Christmas song, to the rest of our holiday traditions and pastimes. We'll talk with Sid here in just a minute. Also after the break, we're going to be joined by Dylan Volk. He's author of the new bestseller, Bad Choices Make Good Stories, a unique book because it's written from the perspective of someone who has conquered autism in American society and has overcome what Dylan calls the feminization of America. For that reason, you can imagine that this kid has some pretty unique views about liberal hysteria over the song, Baby It's Cold Outside. So we'll let Dylan tell you about that. Best-selling book, Bad Choices Make Good Stories, coming up. Today's episode of Real Talk with John Griffing is brought to you by Texas Nationalist Movement, an organization dedicated to holding the federal government accountable for decades and decades of power grabs and attacks on personal liberty. You can check them out at www.tnm.me. That's www.tnm.me. When we come back, we're going to talk about why President Donald Trump thinks he can ban guns simply because he's a Republican. In other news, the woman who keeps the Botox industry alive and kicking, Nancy Pelosi, went head-to-head with Trump and was badly defeated. And we'll talk about millennials. That's right, snowflakes. Though they have a bad rap as Trump-hating, pot-smoking, Xbox-playing basement dwellers, we'll explain what makes a millennial voter, and more importantly, why the second wave may be the key to America's survival. Don't touch that dial or you get a lump of coal in your stocking. If you love Christmas, you love Mojo 5.0. You've been listening to Real Talk.